Mr. Jordan, you mentioned earlier in your opening statement that you said assessments were now being issued worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Can you tell us who those assessments have been sent to?
Not in terms of specific ones that have not otherwise been disclosed, but is there anything?
Well, can I say, I think since the last hearing, Crown Resorts issued a media release talking about a tax assessment that it received.
That's the only one?
Well, that is in the public domain, Senator.
But you can't provide information to the committee?
We can't provide any other information, and there are a number of others in the short to medium term pipeline, some of which are actually going to be based on the implication of what you just said. We couldn't get the information, so we've just moved ahead and said this is our best estimate, you now prove us wrong. It's not normally the way we would go about it, but that's what we're going to be doing, and they're in the process of being finalised. We can't just do it in an offhand way because we get challenged on so many legal technicalities around it. So even on that basis, some will be coming out in the next couple of months on the basis that you've inferred that we just can't get the information, so we're going ahead on what we've got.
And speaking of information, I mean, would your department in principle have any issue with a public register of the settlements that you are able to achieve, so we understand the pressures you're under with resourcing, with expertise, these kind of things, but would you be prepared to provide a public settlement?
Look, we don't see that as actually enhancing our work in any particular way. But again, Mr. Hirschhorn, as the person at the coalface here, might...
Yes, so Senator, I think we understand that people have got a real interest in, the tax, I suppose, big tax disputes involving big companies. Again, I think it's important to look at the difference between transparency between a taxpayer and the tax office and transparency to the community. Look, one thing which has become clear to us is that there is a lack of guidance in the accounting standards as to how companies should inform the market about their tax disputes, and we think that would be relevant to both shareholders and also the general community.
Around continuous disclosure.
Around continuous disclosure, and also, when do you report something as a contingent liability? When do you report it as a liability?
It's a really good point.
And we see some really different practice there, because we know we've issued assessment to some companies and it never comes out. We know others, they will issue a press statement or an ASX statement immediately. So that's a huge variety of circumstances that we observe that we can't say anything about.
Are you able to privately notify ASIC or the ASX around these kind of investigations?
So I would say on this, we are, there are two things. One, we are working with ASIC and the AASB to see if there is an opportunity to provide clear guidance to the market as to how tax disputes should be disclosed and at what stage in the process, so that the market has clarity as to how they should be disclosing these things to the market. When we feel that companies have breached the corporations law, and that can include how they disclose things to the market, we are able to refer matters to ASIC.
And internationally too, if they're domiciled on the New York Stock Exchange or other...
Well, so again, that is more difficult because there's foreign accounting rules and we can't share in the same one.
Right.
But we are exploring. We think that can I say I think if I was a shareholder of a company, I would want to understand its tax performance.
Yes.
I would want to understand if it's got a very low tax rate, whether that's due to policy reasons, whether that's due to tax planning, which might be unsustainable. I would also want to know about tax disputes, and so this is why we are hoping, with a combination of the voluntary tax transparency code and potentially guidance as to how you better account for a tax dispute, that is a good mechanism to get better information into the public domain. What I would say around settlements, and to this committee we've previously said that we've got justice down, recognising the public interests in settlements, and it's interesting because it's often in the rhetoric of we're being too soft on big companies. That is certainly not a view that is often shared with me by big companies, that we're being too soft.
Especially when you're embedded in their businesses.
Yes, and there might be a few companies who complain the opposite, but so involving Justice Downs in that process, what we've actually found is even for somebody like Justice Downs, who is an experienced tax judge many years' experience, it is actually very hard to get on top of the multiple facets of this sort of settlement. So we're talking about the big settlements. It's generally transfer pricing. It's disputes as to what is arm's length levels of debt, arm's length pricing for that debt, the trade-off of past years versus getting them on the straight and narrow for future years. It's actually really hard to reduce a settlement to a very simple story. And so I suppose I don't think a register, it doesn't give us any more information. It gives the public some information. We understand why the public is interested. We're hoping to address that through other means. You know, the Parliament has got other mechanisms, for example, the ANAO, to explore whether we're doing the right job around settlements. But we actually think the better public disclosure mechanism is first to explore accounting standards and continuous disclosure.